Hey, welcome to Mindscope Philosophy. Today, we're diving into a pretty radical warning from the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. And it's an idea that honestly, it challenges pretty much everything our culture tells us about romance, love, and commitment. So, get this. Schopenhauer basically argues that what we think of as super romantic, the whirlwind courtship, the quick, passionate proposal, is actually a form of surrender. It's like you're just giving up your entire future based on, well, an illusion. And a really dangerous one at that. All right, Section 1, the most dangerous advice. So let's just jump right into that phrase we hear all the time. Follow your heart. Sounds nice, right? Well, Schopenhauer saw this as anything but a path to happiness. To him, it was a high-stakes gamble, one with potentially devastating consequences. Think about it like this. When you rush into marriage, you're not building some permanent structure on solid ground. Nope. You're building it on, well, temporary observations and a whole lot of wishful thinking. You're literally betting your entire life on a person you've only ever seen when they're on their absolute best behavior with zero real pressure. I mean, how truly absurd is this gamble when you stop and think about it? You would never, ever hire a CEO after just one interview. You wouldn't invest your entire life savings after only 6 months of research. You wouldn't buy a house after only seeing the perfectly staged rooms, right? In every other area of our lives, we demand data, we do our due diligence, we test things. And yet, for what is arguably the single most important decision of your life, choosing a partner, our whole culture encourages us to just leap based on a tiny, tiny fraction of who a person really is. So why is it such a huge gamble? This brings us to Schopenhauer's next big point, which he calls the performance of love. He saw the whole courtship phase as basically an extended performance. Like both people are just auditioning for a role they might not be able to play long term. He actually had a name for this. He called it the veil of Maya. It's this ancient idea of an illusion that just keeps us from seeing reality for what it is. And during courtship, oh man, that veil is extra thick. We're suddenly more patient, way more generous, more interesting. And look, it's not that we're necessarily lying, but we are absolutely performing a version of ourselves that is just not sustainable in the long run. You're basically seeing the highlight reel and you're mistaking it for the full-length documentary. And here's the scary part. This best behavior phase can last a surprisingly long time, like 12 to 18 months. That's just long enough for a couple to feel super confident, but it's not nearly long enough to see the real person finally step out from behind the curtain. Okay, Section 3, when reality intrudes. So what happens when the performance finally ends and, real life kicks in? Well, when you build a permanent legal structure on what was just a temporary performance, the foundation isn't just weak. Schopenhauer would probably argue it was never even there to begin with. Look, a person's true character, it only really comes out under pressure. Anybody can be charming and pleasant when life is easy, but these are the real stress tests. How do they handle financial pressure? What happens when they lose a job, a family crisis, health problems? What about just an inconvenient promise they made? How do they react when things get genuinely difficult? A rushed marriage just skips this whole vital discovery phase. You end up assuming their character instead of actually seeing it tested. And it's not just about character. Marriage is so much about practical, day-to-day compatibility. You can be wildly attracted to someone whose fundamental approach to money, career, or even how they handle conflict is the total opposite of yours. In a rushed relationship, these deep, deep incompatibilities just stay hidden, buried, until you're already legally and financially tangled up with them. Schopenhauer had this amazing analogy for what happens next. He called it the porcupine's dilemma. Just picture it. Two porcupines trying to get close for warmth, but their own spikes, their fundamental differences, make it impossible. They just keep hurting each other. The closer they get inside the commitment of a marriage, the more painful all that friction becomes. Wow, that's a pretty intense idea, isn't it? The thought of being trapped in a dilemma like that? And it makes me curious. Does this philosophy, does it resonate with you at all? Maybe with things you've seen in your own life or in the lives of people around you? I'd genuinely love to know. Take a second and share your thoughts down in the comments. It would be great to hear your perspective. Okay, so if rushing headfirst into commitment is the problem, then what's the solution? Well, thankfully, Schopenhauer wasn't just a critic. He actually offered a really clear philosophical path for making a much, much wiser choice. And look, this isn't about being cynical or cold. It's about being intelligent. He says, first, use time as your most powerful tool. Give it at least a full year to observe them through all the seasons and different stress levels. Second, shift your focus. Stop worrying so much about, do they like me? And start asking, do I respect how they handle challenges? Third, have the tough, practical talks early on. Talk about money, careers, family, how you both handle arguments. Do it before emotions completely cloud your judgment. And maybe most important of all, watch them when they're stressed. Pay attention to how they treat you when they're tired or disappointed or when they have absolutely nothing to gain by impressing you. That's when the real person shows up. And all this leads us to the final and maybe the most important shift in thinking. The goal of dating isn't actually marriage. The goal is to discover compatibility. Ultimately, being patient and taking your time, that's not a sign of fear or a lack of love. It's actually an act of deep responsibility. You're not postponing happiness. You are actively preventing the emotional and financial devastation that comes from a marriage built on hope instead of actual evidence. You're making sure that the happiness you build is real and that it can actually last. So after all this, what's the ultimate lesson from Schopenhauer? It's a really clear, really direct warning. Just don't rush into marriage. Why? Because a person's true character, it doesn't show up in a few blissful months. It unfolds slowly, over time, and usually under pressure. And that means that real, lifelong compatibility isn't something you just feel or hope for. It's something that has to be tested, observed, and, well, proven. And that leaves us with one last question to really think about. Take a look at your own relationships, whether it's your current one or ones from the past. Are you building your relationship on a solid foundation of evidence, stuff you've actually gathered over time? Or are you building it on the beautiful but incredibly fragile foundation of just hope? For more explorations like this one, ones that really make you think, be sure to subscribe to Mindscope Philosophy. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.